OPEC's ready to put more oil into a market that very much needs it. The expanded Panama Canal is already altering global trade flows. UBS says that brokerage incumbents reign supreme and that disruptors aren't a major factor. And Sweden gets the world's first road that recharges electric trucks as they move over it. I'm JP.
And I'm Chad.
And we discuss all these topics and more on this week's episode of What the Truck.
Well, hey JP, great to be with you again.
Bell Sue-hearted.
Might as well just say it, huh? Might as well just say it. It's actually becoming more interesting what I'm drinking because we already know what you're drinking.
I think Bell's Two-Hearted remains endlessly fascinating.
Clearly you do. I'm branching out today with
what you got there, Chad?
Somewhat of a branching out. I mean, it's an India Pale Ale, otherwise known as an IPA. It's a Ballast Point Fathom. I shouldn't be talking away from the mic. My bad. It feels West Coasty. It's a kind of a West Coasty IPA.
Yeah,
it's
explain the difference between the West Coast IPA and
it's got a light malt body, not a heavy malt body. You know, from those grains.
It's not as
the hop
sweet.
No, it's not. It's not that. The hop characteristics are floral. They feel, in this case, kind of orangey and maybe a little piney.
I see. As opposed to
a heavier malt body is what I think of more in the East Coast.
What does that translate to in terms of like taste?
I think I don't translate. It's hard to explain.
Okay. Yeah. You're so like deep in the beer weeds. It's hard to like. Anyway, cool.
Just wait.
West Coast
until we bring out some
Ballast
stuff
Point
that we've actually
Fathom
brewed. More importantly, we have headlines of all kinds this week.
We
JP,
do. Tons of stuff.
A relatively big story that it's big, but of course. If you've been listening to the past, 2 or 3 weeks worth of material, we have touched on the anticipated day that is today, June 21st. And it's in Vienna. The OPEC meeting is happening.
Right. Right.
Tell us, give us an overview. First of all, what has happened with oil supply over the past few years? Relatively, past 3 years.
Yeah. So basically, there was a crash in 2000 and really back end of 2014 into 15 and 16. Basically, what happened was OPEC was trying to starve American shale producers out of the market. And so they knew that we had a relatively high break-even point on barrels of oil. And so they tried to produce a ton of oil in order to force the price down below American break-even point and starve us out. And it kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. They didn't really finish the job because at the bottom line, oil is just another commodity to the U.S., right? But so if people are making $2 a barrel or $5 a barrel or $10 a barrel on a barrel of oil to pump it and refine it, they're going to do that. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, funds their entire government on oil. And so they need $25 a barrel of profit, $30 a barrel of profit. So it hurt them worse than it hurt us. At the beginning of 2016, OPEC was like reversed course. And so they started cutting production to pump the price back up. And that's kind of been the story for all of 2016, 17, and this year.
And a few things have apparently contributed to the gigantic surplus that we began to see and why things have fallen off a little more dramatically than anticipated.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of global economic growth, a rare period where all of the world's major economic regions were growing at the same time.
It does seem rare.
And that really, as OPEC and we should say OPEC plus Russia, because Russia isn't formally a member of OPEC, but they've been cooperating on petroleum policy.
Yes.
So when they cut production, basically, if you look at the inventories, the strategic reserves.
We have a great graph of it on the OPEC story.
Yes, John Kingston, our executive editor, who came to us from Platts, spent a career covering energy and metals and other commodities, wrote a great story on this. But essentially what happened was all of the major economies' strategic reserves of petroleum have been drawing down.
And besides the global economy thing, and there was also the OPEC cutting, supply as a result of America's shale operations, their oil shale operations growing. Right. But there is also a series of, as Kingston put it, unprecedented reductions in output, not the least of which was, led by Venezuela. And they have apparently, their production has gone down by 50% with no end in sight, and it may even be go worse.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, they used to make 2 to 3 million barrels per day. Now they're making less than 1. Essentially, their economy's in free fall. Their currency is worthless. The government. I mean, the problem is that they have these state-owned petroleum companies. The government literally does not have the money to pay people to work at these places to extract the oil.
So all of that is to say that these are some reasons why things fell off to the dramatic extent that they did. But in the meantime, it looks like a lot of...
They might be opening another can.
You just sprayed my forearm with that.
Yeah, well, so
good times.
So in Vienna, so what they're saying basically, they're not saying anything drastic. They're not saying that,
but they've been telegraphing the signals of what's going on, and the price of oil has been going down as a result.
Especially Russia, especially Saudi Arabia, Iran has been the main resistor to increasing production. But essentially, what they're saying is we can increase production and still stay at 100% of the planned production cut that was announced earlier. Like Iran, Russia is basically saying like Venezuela is falling off faster than predicted. Let us increase production to offset that, and we'll still maintain the agreement beforehand.
And all indications seem that things are stabilizing in a favorable, reasonable way. We hope that cooler heads, rational thought will prevail, and that indeed they will increase the surplus.
Yeah, and states, and the way this affects American trucking, I think we should say, is that it doesn't seem to be a threat to the American oil industry, especially shale, which is quite trucking intensive, as we've said before.
We're seeing rising fuel costs.
Oh yeah, fuel costs are way up, and I don't know how much that will be affected. It's a little bit more. The supply chain of oil is a little bit more complicated when you get into the refineries moving crude back and forth. Actually producing a diesel fuel product out of crude. So that's wait and see for price action on diesel fuel.
And we will. And, one story that you covered, which I thought was a really interesting story this week related to maritime, is what's happening with the expanded Panama Canal and how it's, there's this emerging new reality of how it's altering global trade flows. You want to tell us a little bit about how this has happened and what's happening? Yeah,
it's really interesting. I mean, this 100-year-old piece of infrastructure just broke its all-time volume record for a month in May. It's based on the expansion. This is actually the third time it's broken its all-time volume record.
Oh wow!
Since the expansion was finished,
and just in May, you mentioned
last month, the most recent month,
38.1 million tons went through the canal,
and that's like ton. Yeah, and then there's a special Panama Canal standard measurement sort of formula that computes that. But essentially, what's happening is we're getting a lot more containers from Asia going through the canal to the East Coast instead of going to the West Coast and being trucked across the country.
Yeah.
And So right now, I think the spread between...
So that's kind of cool, right?
It's very cool.
I mean, in a lot of ways.
It's very cool.
Efficiency, some costs.
It lowers average length of haul for cargo. It's able to deliver freight to the population centers on the East Coast more efficiently.
And I was going to say, and at a time where capacity is so tight.
Exactly. So there's about, if you look at the container rates to ship something from, say, Shanghai to Long Beach versus Shanghai to Savannah, it's about $1,000 difference.
Okay.
But it costs more than that, a lot more than that, to truck something from Long Beach to Savannah. And the question is, who is going to control the Midwest? Is Savannah going to start supplying Chicago to a higher degree? That's sort of where we're looking at this
story. The Georgia Ports Authority is on track to have their most successful year in its history, and on a number of fronts.
Yep. And the other half of the Panama Canal volume story. So we talked about the East Coast container trade, but we're also talking about westbound LNG.
Right. It was
LNG,
both directions.
Liquefied natural gas, and LPG, which is liquefied petroleum gas, which is essentially butane and propane. And so essentially this is being driven by fracking. When if you try to exploit a conventional oil play, you're basically just putting a straw into an underground lake of oil, right? And so you're just getting oil. When you do fracking, there's a ton of different hydrocarbons sort of locked into that rock, including natural gas. And so when you frack, you get oil, but you also get natural gas as a byproduct. And so all the oil they've been doing in the Permian and like that, they've been getting natural gas with it too, causing the price of natural gas in the U.S. to go way down. It's still very high in Asia. There's about so per million BTUs, there's about an $8 difference. It's like $3 in the U.S. It's like 11 to 12 overseas. And so they're refining that natural gas. They're putting it on tankers. They're sending it westbound through the Panama Canal to basically to Japan, Korea, and China. And so they're just printing money at this point because they can get it for $3 at the Henry Hub pipeline in Louisiana, and in Japan it costs $11.60.
That reminds me, speaking of straws, it reminds me of There Will Be Blood, and now my straw reaches across the room and starts to drink
your milkshake.
Yeah, but thank goodness we're not doing that. This is our own stuff we're drinking.
Yeah, so
and it's good. It's exciting.
What's interesting though is just one last tidbit. In 2015, there were 0 LNG ships transiting the Panama Canal.
Okay.
In this fiscal year alone, there's been 182.
Wow, some great data coming out.
It's a new trade flow that's been enabled by this infrastructure investment.
Part of why to stay tuned to What the Truck. You're going to learn about little things like this, including a very important headline that is coming out today, or actually it was a couple days ago. UBS's report that basically what they're reporting. This is interesting. Brokerage incumbents still reigning supreme.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Disruptors, all these technology disruptors, not really making the dent that we might have anticipated they were making.
Yeah. You covered the story, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what UBS said about the brokerage truckload business in the U.S.?
Well, one of the main challenges that we've known about for freight brokers is developing and maintaining their reliable carrier base, and as a result, it's probably may come as no surprise to some people that for all the hype, for all the talk, in the end, there's a lot of competition from the new tech focused brokers, right. But there's not a big dent in what's happening across the just the landscape of the industry and how things are actually transactions that are happening.
So the adoption of these digital apps, what we call like the Uberization of freight, that hasn't really had that much market penetration. And on the other hand, the big incumbents like C.H. Robinson have invested millions and millions of dollars into technology, and they actually have really impressive platforms.
They actually do.
Stiefel just resumed their coverage of all of the major 3PLs, and they kind of were saying that, like, even the company that we think of as the original tech disruptor of the brokerage space, Echo Logistics, is now so big. It's these companies have an advantage when they're already at scale.
For sure. I mean, it's
so in a tight capacity market, shippers need them to find trucks. In a low capacity, in a loose sort of capacity market, trucks need them to find loads, and so they're playing both sides of the field. And if they can have an efficient user experience, they can basically maintain loyalty.
And basically, like, I think that one of the things that Zach Strickland has pointed out for a while as well is that it's hard to compete with like a C.H. Robinson's scale. Their reach remain it's like they have the scale, they have the network. All they have to do is intelligently and strategically apply and adopt the right tech.
Study their own data, and then they'll be good.
And while you to some extent, when you become so large, it might be harder than meets the eye to do that. You're not light, you're not agile, you can't make quick decisions. But it seems that actually Navisphere, their technology, is doing well.
It's almost like industry leading, is what I've heard.
It is now. It's starting to be, and it's interesting. But it's at the same time, it's not to say that the Ubers and the Convoys of the world, Uber Freight and Convoys, the scale is achievable. It's just that it's not happening as fast as some might think. In terms of the tech plays,
right, and that's another point that I heard from some financial analysts who are studying this space.
Okay,
excuse me, is that basically C.H. Robinson is the biggest brokerage in North America by a factor of 3.
Yes,
right, but they still
just enormous.
They still only command 12% of market share. So in that, all of that. Potential addressable market.
Yeah, that's an interesting look. Okay, it's and interestingly, in terms of their downloads, which is an important measurable part of the market traction in this space, it ranges from 7 to 17% of the downloads over the past 4 years. While Coyote. Is ranged in the range of 3 to 14% during that same time. So it's a wider range, but they're getting the downloads, and that kind of is showing that it doesn't completely translate, but it means that brokers are able to find them. It means they
know where you are.
Presence. Yes, right. They know where
you are. If you have their app on your phone, they know where you are.
So some interesting data coming out. In a way, you could almost say it's like a non-story that the incumbents are still the incumbents. I think that it's an update. It's crazy things aren't happening yet, but it's a process.
Well, it also I think it just shows that the incumbents are taking the digitization of their industry very seriously, and they're trying to leverage the networks they already have and the data they already have to be the best at it.
Right.
You know what I
mean? That's a great point. They're taking it seriously.
They're almost learning from their challengers and trying to beat them in a way.
Yeah.
At their own game.
And our data is our data from the past several months has been indicating the very thing that this UBS report is saying. Finally, one of our main headlines of the week is that Sweden gets the world's first road that recharges electric trucks as they move over it.
Sweden.
Yeah, go Sweden. But it turns out that it might not be as big of a deal as it sounds like. Hey, it's the exciting part is they figured out some of the safety stuff.
Spoiler alert: this isn't electrifying I-75.
Right.
How many miles are we talking about, Chad?
Well, as I read the story, unfortunately, JP, it's only the amount of road that I could probably run, which is 1.25 miles. Like
you could probably run further than that.
I don't know, unless I was running from something.
But if your batteries were being charged while you were running,
well,
who knows how long you
could keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
I could keep going all day long. And that's it, though. That's why it's wild. Like they figured out all these safety things about how, it wouldn't get in the way of it would be perfectly safe. Nobody's going to get electrocuted. This seemed to be a fear thing. And also, it wouldn't be like winter and storms and all kinds of things could happen over this infrastructure and it wouldn't make a difference. But in the end, it's only 1.25 of miles of space.
So we're talking about, sort of a rich environmentalist country doing this pilot project that sort of, proof of concept that we can build a smart road that will charge a car.
Here's the funny part about it. As the next step, the Swedish government is looking to lay a longer stretch to around 15 to 20 miles in a couple of years.
That's pretty cool.
It's like, what's cool about this is what you just said, proof of concept.
Yeah.
That the very fact that there may be ways to charge your EVs as you go, like that, there's game changer there.
Oh, for sure.
But
definitely.
Yeah, but
I would wonder about, how much of a charge you pick up from going over this road. Like, are you simply extending your range, or does your battery never deplete? You say at 100%.
Yeah,
I kind of wonder about those.
I had a lot of questions about,
but it's really interesting, and they're pointing to the future of electric vehicles. I mean, I think like the multi-hour recharge sort of proposition is viewed skeptically by a lot of people. And so if they can figure out a way to build smart infrastructure, especially where it's needed.
It's a potential approach to a solution, especially when they parallel rail lines, which is apparently where they're getting a lot of the power as well. So long stretches of lonely highway between El Paso and Houston. Sorry, you're
going to be on your own battery.
You're out. So anyway, kind of interesting though, and along those lines,
it leads us into our interview with Gio Sordoni of Thor Trucks. They're building.
Had a fantastic interview with him at Transparency 18.
Yeah, and they're building electric trucks, and they actually have a really cool sort of a collaborative kind of industry incumbent in a way approach to it. So unlike Tesla, for example, they're not trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, and one thing I really like about this group of Thor is they're very, their MO is they're very modest. They're not bragging.
They're like, if someone can build the drivetrain better than we can, we want to partner with them.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've consistently said, look, we're not trying to compare ourselves to Tesla. We are our own people just doing our thing. So
and the founder and CEO of the company came from a trucking family that owned a fleet of about 250 trucks. They get the economics of the industry, which I think is like so important.
Right, Dakota is similar.
It's like what kind of vehicles will be attractive to what kind of customers. I mean, I think that's their strength really.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. And here is our interview with Gio. For our 5 Good Minutes segment today, we're joined by COO of Thor Trucks, Gio Sordoni. Did I get that right? Growing up, Gio suffered from terrible asthma due to a pollution-riddled Los Angeles. That's at least part of how he and partner, CEO Dakota Simler, were motivated to start a project that would have a social impact, an environmental impact, and could be a sustainable business. An electric truck startup seemed like a perfect fit. Gio, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan, so it's a big moment for me.
Oh!
We are big fans of Thor.
And we're excited. Are you ready to play 5 Good Minutes?
I was born ready.
All right. Well, ready or not, here we come. And if you can manage to do this very difficult gauntlet of questions in 5 minutes, you get the free T-shirt, man. All right, so in December of 2017, Thor announced plans to bring a heavy-duty electric vehicle to market before the Tesla Semi hits in 2019, and of course that may never happen, but how much closer are you to a target date here at the end of May 2018?
We are much closer and still targeting full production in 2019. To clean up the record a little bit, I will say that it was never our position that we were out to beat Tesla to market.
Oh, I remember that.
It was more of a journalist construed idea, which is fine.
Cool.
And it got you some attention.
All right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the battery? What have you learned about batteries in building the ET1? What kind of technology are you using? And are you partnering with anyone in particular?
Yeah, so a big lesson in batteries is that you need an application-specific solution for different applications. So one of the big lessons learned early on was don't try to use a battery that was designed for a passenger car and adapt it to a commercial vehicle. The application is just different. Passenger cars focus on having limited space rather than things like cost and weight and range and safety. And so being that in a commercial vehicle, we have more space, that gives us the opportunity to start with a focus on safety, on cost, and on performance, meaning range and weight, rather than being kind of limited by space and going from that direction. Another lesson in battery, we are very cost competitive and know that in order to put vehicles on the road with hundreds of kilowatt hours, we need to be somewhere around $200 a kilowatt hour for our costs. So that's the goal for us.
Okay, so in-house is what I'm hearing on that.
In-house, so we have a humble portfolio of patents around our battery module design and the cooling mechanism and the software around that. The cells do come from suppliers. We're not chemists and building our own cells, but we are also supplier agnostic when it comes to that vein. There are a few people that you can buy really good cells from. We're using a very high energy density format cylindrical cell that is seeing improvements in the kind of range of 5 to 10% a year for the next 8 or so years. It's a new product, so they'll continue iterating on it.
Terrific. Do you have any customers yet? Are you taking reservations?
And what kind of customers are you trying to sell these trucks to?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, and the kinds of customers that have applications that are around 300 miles or under and return home at night, those are going to be the lowest hanging fruit for us. So kind of short to medium range vehicles that can install, or fleets that can install charging at their facilities rather than relying on a public charging infrastructure. That's going to be the bread and butter for commercial electric vehicles in the next few years. So folks that do that are really excited, and that's applications like local delivery, grocery, drayage, intermodal. There's plenty of folks, even more than half of the Class 8 market is doing regional type or local type hauls.
Gio, right now Thor Trucks is about 30 people. Over 90% of them are engineers. And I'm just wondering, as you guys are starting to scale up production, what's the biggest challenge or hurdle or barrier that you guys are facing right now?
Yeah, it's, one is focus. There's a lot of different directions that we could be pulled in. So it's trying to keep focus on getting vehicles on the road and doing one thing at a time. Another challenge for any company in the space right now, just because it's so hot, is recruiting and hiring the amount of people that we need to hire to continue to scale and grow. Even in Los Angeles, where there's plenty of very talented engineers on the software side and the system side and the battery side, it's still a very competitive marketplace when you have, every day it seems like there's a new Chinese supercar OEM that hire 1,800 people in a year, and so there's a lot of competition for the types of jobs that we are hiring for.
Yes, it's a tight space there in California, right?
Right.
When are you guys looking to close Series A funding?
Sometime this summer. So we haven't formally opened it yet, but it's going to be a quick one just because there's been a lot of customers as well as kind of strategic investors that have expressed interest in getting in.
Excellent job.
Awesome.
We peppered you with 5 questions and you still managed to do it in 4:49. That may be a record, Gio, so far. So nice job, Barry. Let's give the man a t-shirt or 2 or 3. All right, Gio, so glad you could make it. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, guys. Next time I want in on the beer exchange.
Right.
I know. Right. Yeah, you got to come in-house and we'll pop the top on a fresh beer of your choice.
I'll be back.
All right, thanks, dude.
Awesome, man. And now it's time to play Big Deal or Little Deal. Are you ready, Dill Pickle?
Are we with the 8 topics like last time?
Well, we're raising the ante.
The pressure is still on.
Yeah, and this time we're going to do better than 2 minutes and 2 seconds. We're going to do this in 1:59. Are you ready?
I think so.
Ford VW to explore joint development of commercial vehicles. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. Ford is already in the last mile business with the transit vans, and Volkswagen is owning a larger and larger share of Navistar. I think the possibilities here are limitless.
Penske Logistics to acquire Epes Transport Systems. Big deal or little deal?
It's a little deal. It's important that Penske is getting into the truckload market, but Epes has lost a bunch of executives recently. Small deal.
The Chainalytics Cohen indices tell us about freight markets, and a lot has changed for carriers. Big deal or little deal?
Little deal. Their data is like 2 months old.
Hotlanta is popping off. Big deal or little deal?
I would say a little deal. It's temporary. It's a surge. It's a surge that we predicted, tracking the flow of freight from LA to Dallas to Atlanta. Port volumes keep humming along. Tariff impact minimal for now. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. The 2018 capacity crunch song remains the same. Tariffs or no tariffs?
A sweet deal. Nestle and XPO set to open a massive distribution center in the UK. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. It's going to be one of the most advanced distribution management centers in the world, granting consumers quicker access to some of Nestle's over 2,000 brands. Way to go, XPO.
Google puts over $500 million into Chinese e-commerce giant JD.com. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. $550 million, making Google a key stakeholder in their fortunes. This will help both companies expand even in China, where e-commerce has grown surprisingly since 2015, roughly 500 million strong.
eHarvest Hub developing farm-to-table solutions by cutting out the middleman. Big deal or little deal?
It's a big deal. You cut out the middleman, that's a big deal. They don't even have to have a blockchain solution so far. I love their solutions. Go eHarvest Hub.
Oh, we got it! We did
it! It just goes to show you something. And that'll do it for the big stories this week. As always, we go into more detail about each of the topics we've talked about today on our website, FreightWaves.com. We will continue to publish this podcast weekly, so be sure to subscribe to What the Truck on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, make sure to leave us a review to let us know what you think of our new podcast.
And if you're interested in freight economics and finance, come to our Market Waves conference at the Gaylord Texan Resort and Convention Center in Grapevine, Texas this November. Visit marketwaves18.com to learn more about this event.
That'll do it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week on What the Truck.